Welcome Wargamers to a video that is a little bit different from the others because I want to talk about a game that I have not touched in a hot minute, and that is of course Warhammer Underworlds. Now if you've never really heard of this game or you're new to the hobby, imagine Warhammer meets Magic the Gathering and you smash them together. You get a game where it's hex based, you do have miniatures in there, and then you have a deck building element that allows those miniatures to do cool things and score all kinds of objectives and all that kind of stuff. It is a living card game, so what that means is, there's no random packs or anything like that. When a new expansion comes out with a warband, it will have cards specifically for that warband as well as universal ones. So if you want to have access to every single thing, you can buy whatever you want, however many you want, but you can only have one of each card in your deck. So what that means is there's not a lot of incentive to go out and just buy everything. It kind of limits the pay to win aspect a bit, especially given that warbands only come out every once in a while. It's not like a weekly thing or even a quarterly thing in the same way that Magic the Gathering, completely revitalizes their line. So you have your deck of cards, you have some very specific miniatures, you can't custom build your warband. They are exactly as they are dictated. They are on their, when you buy them. And one of the things that's always appealed to me about this game is the idea that it's asymmetrical objectives. So when I say that, what I mean is, you get to choose what your warband is actively trying to do. So you get to pick your own objective cards, which you draw randomly, and those can be anything from killing enemies to standing on certain objectives, being in your enemy's side of the board, them being in yours, all those kinds of things. And they just allow a lot of different versatility. So if you have a warband that you're really excited to get into melee with, you can just give them objectives that really emphasize combat, and that's how you personally will achieve victory. Meanwhile, your opponent can pick something totally different, very defensive or something like that. And then it's just a race to see who can do what they want to do better. And I love that as a design aspect. And I like that a lot because there's nothing sadder than when you go to play a full game of, I'm just going to use 40k as an example, right? You build your army to do a cool narrative thing and your opponent smashes you from across the table with long-range fire to the point where your army can no longer do the cool narrative thing. Maybe they sniped out a hero that's important for a combination or something like that. However it works, those kinds of moments just really suck the wind out of a game. But with Underworlds, every single round in this 3-round game has you trying to do the things that your warband wants to do. Cool moments that you want to see happen, you are rewarded for them with cool deck building. And the reason I love that is because not only are you trying to achieve what makes your warband sound awesome, you're looking at your opponent and let's say they're playing Fire Slayers. You look down and you're like, what are those guys trying to do, right? The little Fire Slayer guys, they like to sit on objectives and have a very control-focused game. What objectives are they sitting on? Do I need to move them off? How can I thwart my opponent's plan at the same time as achieving mine? And so I like how it's this race to see who can do what they want to do better. Now, while that explanation is still 100% accurate in terms of that's how deck building works, it's how warbands work, the game has evolved wildly since I last played it. So I played Underworlds when it first came out. There was a few games going at my local GW store in Linwood, Washington. I played there for a little bit, and the first wave of warbands, it was Shadespire, was kind of odd. I don't think the design team knew where they wanted to go mechanically. So the game, in my opinion, got a little bit stale fairly quick, but that's when I kind of put mine away because I couldn't find people to play with. But in the time that I have been gone, the game has expanded in so many cool different ways. I got a list here. They've added spell casting, different kinds of objectives that can be scored mid-round or have different qualifiers, you have to do certain crazy tasks to be able to achieve them. They've added ranged attacks, which they didn't have initially. You have deadly terrain and even faction-specific rules, and this is kind of what I wanted to highlight here. And I'm actually very floored by this explosion of new rules because it makes the game so much more vibrant than it was before. Instead of a tactical game where there is deck building, it's a very tactical element of it, as well as positioning and the different goals that factions have. The initial set being, Steelheart's Champions, a 3-man Stormcast warband versus a bunch of very expendable meat shields in the form of the Khorne warband that came with it. Things have evolved way beyond that. And so what I'd like to do is go to the downward cam. I want to show off some of the mechanics and the cards that I think really add life into this game, because I'm looking at this, and before Shadespire, Underworlds, was very much a game unto itself. Like, it wasn't Warhammer that I knew. The more that I have looked at the different warbands that are coming out post, I'm going to say Beastgrave, that starter set, the game has taken on a new life. And so now when you're playing some of these factions, you have narratively led objectives, and there's internal storytelling within the warbands, and there's all kinds of cool stuff. So I wanted to show off mine and just have a little chat. Okay, so here we are at the downward cam, and I just wanted to show off my warband. I'm going to throw some better pictures of the models up here every once in a while. But the reason I wanted to do this was I wanted to bust out a good example of how this game has evolved to include things like storytelling and lore and all those very fun explanations for stuff that make games so much more interesting than just figures and cards and junk. This warband was once much larger, okay? I'm getting this lore from a card insert that came with the warband. It was much larger, and it was led by Zarshia Bittersoul, a Chaos Sorcerer. They went into Beastgrave for the purpose of desecrating the place, basically going room to room within the mountain, building chaos shrines and twisting it from the inside out to be a chaotic place that exudes evil and all these kinds of things. You know, like Slaves to Darkness stuff. But they got in there, and it was way more dangerous than they expected, and so their warband was thinned down to just these 4 warriors. At which point, there was pretty much a revolt, and Zarshia lost control of the warband. Her sister, Kagra the Usurper, leader of the warband, took control. So we have the Usurper of her power leading the warband, trying to desecrate stuff. Now there's 2 stories within that. There's the story of the warband as a whole, desecrating everything, and then there's the story of these 2 sisters within that context. And the rules and the cards that are in this deck and its set in general allow you to tell both of those stories. Okay, and that's what I want to emphasize, is the ability to tell stories with these rules. So we start off with something called desecration tokens. This is a mechanic. I'm not going to go super into it right now, but basically you can desecrate objectives on the table. The warband is doing exactly what they set into Beastgrave to do. They are actively twisting it to the powers of chaos. So that's one storytelling. And I'm going to say it's a very thin layer. You know, desecration tokens, they're an alright mechanic. Not bad. But then there's 2 cards I want to focus on that I think are quite awesome. The first one is Eye of the Gods. So we'll pull out Kagra here. To court the gaze of the dark gods is perilous, yet those who prove worthy are made mighty indeed. This is essentially Eye of the Gods. This is the upgrade table that you get access to in Slaves to Darkness if you kill a hero or a monster. So it's like the gods see Kagra doing something awesome, and they give her a blessing. In the context of this game, it's +1 dice, +1 damage, cleave, or ensnare. They make her attacks better, but you get to choose your blessing. So I love the fact that in this game, she's still walking the path to glory, because that is a path to glory rule. But also, the storytelling between these 2 characters has this card, Power Reclaimed. Play this if your leader, Kagra, is out of action. The friendly Zarshia is a leader, so she becomes the leader of the warband yet again. The Usurper is dead, she's in charge, has +1 wound and +1 wizard level. She just basically goes Super Saiyan because now she's back in charge. I love this. At any given point, you're telling the story of this warband, desecrating things as much as they can, but within that is the internal struggle of 2 sisters who basically are vying for control of the warband itself, and therefore, the fate of the mission. Now, one of the things that made me smile when I was playing this yesterday was the spell that Zarshia has access to, which is Mask of Darkness. If you don't remember, there was a Forge World model. It was a sorcerer that came with a spawn. It was back when they were doing like the Tomerkin's Horde setup thing. His spell, Mask of Darkness, let you teleport units across the board, okay? They basically brought that into this game as well, and just put it on her so she can like teleport people to different objectives and stuff. I used it yesterday. Grade A spell. It's freaking cool. Now, as far as the deck that came with Kagura's Ravagers, I was doing a demo game, or I guess relearning the game, not really a demo. And I just played with the deck that it came with. When I was playing Shadespire the same way, I hated it. I hated being the Steel Soul champion guys with their pre-made deck. It was terrible. And the deck building aspects of this game were just very overwhelming for me. So I didn't like it at all. The deck that came with Kagura's Ravagers, I actually liked it quite a bit. It definitely favors an aggressive, kind of what you'd imagine from a Chaos Army. There's plenty of objectives that focus on desecrating things, on killing opponents, on, specifically how you kill them, whether it's on an objective. There's an objective for, a goal for Zarshia to kill somebody, like snipe them with a spell, all kinds of stuff. It plays to the strengths of the warband very thematically. Now, one of the things they also added since I last played was card rotation, okay? So now, whatever set you're currently in, so right now we're in Dire Chasm, all of those cards and the set previous, which would mean Beastgrave, are good to go. But anything before then, any, universal cards before then, are out for like matched legal play if you're going to an event or something like that. But what I like, and at first I was like, oh man, that's such a bummer, like that so many of these cards are no longer useful. But the thing is, they basically, for the universal cards, just refresh them with new wording, new phrasing, and revitalize them with keeping the game evolving in terms of language and that kind of stuff that we need to keep playing accurately. So what that means is, let's say there was a card that was universal, that was a little bit ambiguous and had a lot of FAQs to it. Well, when that card leaves the cycle, another card that has a very similar effect may enter, through a new expansion that has all the cleaned up wording. And so in that way, you're basically refreshing things and keeping the game evolving so that nothing falls too far behind. We've all seen, in Age of Sigmar anyway, battle tomes that the perfect example is Maggotkin of Nurgle. Everything else in the game has, unmodified hit rolls of 6 do blank. But the Maggotkin were the last book to have that hit rolls of 6. And that mattered for so long. Well, issues like that, of course, they can be FAQ'd, but it's really nice for this system to be able to be like, hey, just get rid of it, and then we'll just put in something that's way better worded, way more balanced, way more thought out, and put that into the system. So that's great. Also keep in mind, it's only universal cards. So all the objective cards that give Kagura cool stuff about desecration tokens and all those kinds of things, anything faction specific, which makes up anywhere between like a half and a third of the cards you get when you buy these, those never go out of style. So your warband can always play thematically just like they were intended to be. And in that sense, I feel like I'm not really losing something when cards rotate out. I gain a lot of those same cards back with better wording that's keeping the game updated and keeping it fresh. But my warband can always have access to the things thematically that make it fun. And of course, if you don't like that, there's always different formats. I mean, they actually have different official formats for using whatever cards you want, just like Magic the Gathering has. Now, some of the cool, faction-specific things that are really out there in terms of design that I love, the Vampires, one of the newest warbands to come out, they have a hunger mechanic where they're constantly trying to feed. Obviously, Kagura's Ravagers is telling the story of two sisters vying for power as they corrupt the mountain. I also went out yesterday. Let me pull it up here. I grabbed these guys. This is Head Cracka's Mad Mob for Bone Splitters, because I wanted to see if they were able to do the same level of storytelling. Do these feel like Bone Splitters? Short answer, yeah, like a lot. They're crazy. They're out there. It all revolves around the shaman. The archer even has an equivalent to the Kuninruk, loads of arrows type thing where you can shoot more than once. There's all kinds of cool stuff in here, and I think it's an astoundingly fun warband that I'm excited to build and try out. There's also different elements that are very Gur themed as we move into, this current edition. I know Beastgrave was already in Gur before the main story arc of Age of Sigmar went there, but they're continuing that and kind of feeding into it with things like Hunter and Quarry, where you can have one of your characters be the hunter and he gets, you know, basically just to pick out his prey and then smash that guy on the tabletop. You also have stuff like Primacy, which just favors whoever is pushing the aggressive actions of the game, which the Mad Mob love that stuff. All their mechanics are built around it. Point I'm trying to say is the game has evolved immensely, like immensely in terms of just being deck building and smashing guys together to now I feel like it is mini Warhammer. Okay, by that I mean the factions feel different, they play different, and the newer ones allow you to craft a narrative for the events that happened. And I'm super impressed with it. The deck building to me, honestly, is still a turnoff. I won't lie about that. The thing is, though, is that with the way card rotation works, it trimmed the amount of expansions you're trying to look at and look through and sort through to a very narrow block, which is actually very helpful for me. I mean, you can look at it as all these cards that are gone, but all the faction-specific ones that I want to be able to achieve thematically anyway are still in, and now it's a smaller pool that is more tightly focused and managed. So that has actually been very helpful for me because I can go onto websites and see the full card databases, and it's a way smaller list than it used to be. Now, the way that I got into this warband, if you're curious, was when Warriors of Chaos in this new edition went from minimum-sized units of 5 to minimum-sized units of 10, I had a problem, of course. And so I grabbed 2 boxes of Kagha's Ravagers. One, I just wanted the cool Chaos Sorcerer sculpt because I hate the actual GW model, but this one's awesome, Zarshia. So I wanted that sculpt, and of course you get 3 what are essentially Chaos Warriors in that box. And so I bought 2 of them just to fill out the unit and gain some access to some cool models. So I have no regrets there. That's how I got into it. And then once I had those boxes, I was like, well, heck, you know, I got locally, Underworlds is way more popular than Age of Sigmar, so let's just play that, right? I mean, why try to force it? I've been giving demos for AOS 3.0, but not a lot of takers. There was a big Underworld scene, and it's trying to come back to life after lockdown. So I was like, okay, so what do I need to actually play? I have these warbands already. I went onto eBay and I grabbed, I think it was like all the junk minus the models from the Dire Chasm set for like $12. So that's my dice, that's some universal cards, the warband stuff for a few other things, and then the boards. Like, it was great. So I got that in, and then yesterday I played my first game of Underworlds in a long time in person. I had an absolute blast. Played against a wonderful player named Tara. She was, I think, learning I don't know if she was learning the game so much as she was learning her warband. She had the Gloomspite Gitz ones, which are weirdly complex. Not gonna lie to you, I was kind of floored by the amount of rules on their cards, but they're really quite cool. Very flavorful as well. But it was an absolutely wonderful game, and I pulled out the win in the end, but it was looking real dicey there for a bit. So that's how I got into the game, or back into the game. I would suggest you do the same. Pick out a warband that seems cool, and then snag whatever, you know, all the non-model stuff off eBay if you're looking to get in cheap. If you like one of the factions that comes in the starter set, they are a wonderful value. You know, let's say you liked the Heed Knights of Slaanesh stuff in Dire Chasm, just grab that and sell the elves if you really don't want them. But honestly, I mean, it's a very low barrier to entry game. So I have some games of Underworlds coming up again soon with some other folks, and I'm very excited to try them out. I really want to try getting good at Kagha's Ravagers, and then I might switch over to Headcracker's Mad Mob, because the Mad Mob has nothing to do with terrain, whereas the Kagha's do. So I want to see how, like, they're both aggressive, both, you know, very heavily melee oriented and damage dealing, very aggro play styles, but they do it in 2 different ways. And so I think that would be a cool way to, like, split up what my objectives are and how I'm learning the game and things like that. If Warhammer Underworlds content is something that you'd be interested in, please let me know in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you want that. It just helps me understand what to prioritize. There's so many things to talk about and only so many hours in a day to do it. So let me know in the comments down below, and I would love to hear your thoughts and see what you think there. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.